as you do research on our mitochondrial DNA, you find that it goes back into the range of 150,000 years based on the mitochondrial DNA, which is, I think, pretty much incontrovertible. If we're 150 to 200,000 years old, that throws a huge, gigantic wrench into the establishment position that we evolved from creatures that were walking upright approximately 4 million years ago. The early Australopithecines, Lucy, everyone is familiar with her, at around 3.2 to 3.5 million years ago, and they're finding new ones all the time. And all they say is to qualify as human is to be upright walking. If you're an upright walking pre-creature, you're called a pre-human. Even though all of those creatures, right through Neanderthal, from Lucy at 4 million years ago, right through the Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon, right up to Cro-Magnon, all of those creatures don't look anything like human beings as we are today. They are as different from us as primates. In fact, they look like primates. They look like upright walking primates. Up through Neanderthal, back to Lucy, and whatever's going to come before her. What could make something change so radically, literally overnight, in anthropological terms, and be anything remotely associated with Darwinism? I believe, personally, that the writings of the Sumerians 4,000 years ago, as chronicled by Zecharia Sitchin in his books, The Earth Chronicles, I believe that is the most logical and reasonable explanation that there is for how we came to be.
20-some odd years ago, Zecharia Sitchin wrote The 12th Planet. In The 12th Planet, he describes ancient writings and texts by the Sumerians depicting a 3,600-year orbit of Nibiru. But the Sumerians are rarely spoken about in history books. Who were the Sumerians? And what could an ancient civilization possibly know about how we came to be?
We only hear about like the Egyptians or the Mayans or the Incans, Romans, Greeks. The first culture we have on Earth were the Sumerians, and they showed up 6,000 years ago where modern-day Iraq is. It's right between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. It was then known as Mesopotamia, Babylon, but also Sumeria, where the first culture on Earth stems. And they have left us over 100 of the first for high society to take place. For instance, stemming from Sumeria 6,000 years ago, they were the first ones to invent writing. They had a system of over 400 characters known as cuneiform text, and use a wedge-shaped stylus or an object with a wedge, and would twist and turn and make all these characters that came up to about 400 characters, and they had their own complete language like an alphabet that we use today, A through Z, but this stemmed out of Sumeria 6,000 years ago, and all of the first for high society come from them. Time, the calendar, math, schools, courts, judges, systems of law, all of this originated in Sumeria, which was then known as Mesopotamia, Babylon, today's modern-day Iraq.
The Sumerians are actually probably the most influential culture of the ancient world. Not the Egyptians, not the Greeks, not the Romans, the Sumerians. The Sumerians invented, for example, the zodiac. All of the symbols that we still have today for the zodiac was created by the Sumerians. They tell an incredible story, the Sumerians do, of the Annunaki, which is that there's another planet in our solar system, that gods, super beings, live on this planet, that these beings come to Earth. The Sumerians had a pantheon of gods, but it was living gods. They were the Sumerians worshipped living gods who lived and worked and had their lives among them. They were the Annunaki. Among those Annunaki, there were 12 leaders, 12 super gods, the bosses, the boss of bosses. Those 12 gods come down and are present in the Egyptian culture, in the Greek culture, and in the Roman culture. They just have different names, but they have basically the same personalities and the same functions. So it isn't that mythology begins with the Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans. Mythology begins with the Sumerians. Monotheism didn't kick in until the gods, the multiple gods, actually physically left.
When we look at all the stories in the Bible about how God is a feared God, and if you do what God tells you, you are given the reprisal of going to heaven, or if you do wrong, you go to hell, and it's very black and white. But the Sumerians give us a lot more context into that line of thinking and how it came about in their image and after their likeness. The Annunaki quoted to the Sumerians as saying, "We have created you in our image and after our likeness, and we were their slaves," basically, to do as they bid it. Mine the gold, do their daily chores. We were basically their slaves.
The leader said, "We'll make you a slave. We'll make you a servant." And that's the reason, the impetus, according again to the Sumerian writings, for the creation of human beings. The story of Noah is a classic that comes right out of the Sumerian texts. The word Eden, the Anunnaki called the land where they lived the Eden. The Adam, they called the worker slave that they created the Adamu, plural.
Could the Anunnaki have genetically engineered humans? It sounds incredible until we consider that we ourselves genetically engineer the fruit and vegetables we eat every day. From tomatoes to apples and oranges to cloning Dolly the sheep. If we can genetically manipulate DNA, then who's to say that we weren't created or our DNA wasn't tampered with by another race of beings in the past? Now the question is, were we? Did they? And if we were, there must be some empirical evidence, some clues left behind, besides writing in a text that points to this.
If you look at the human genome, you'll see that it looks very much like a primate genome, except the second and third chromosomes are fused into one. So, what does that solve? It gives you all the chromosomal material of the primate, but it's now only taking up the space in the combining process of 46. It is 46 chromosomes with 48 chromosomes of genomic material still in there. Now, how could nature do that? How could nature fuse those two chromosomes together in any length of time? It wouldn't happen. It couldn't happen. That was done.
According to Sitchin, we were created genetically by the Anunnaki as a worker, to mine gold for them, to serve them. People out there, even if you're not a scholar, even if you're not anything, if you open your eyes a little bit to this and you start just doing your own research, you're going to find paths there that lead you to some things that are going to awaken new ideas into you. And the next few years, I think we're going to see a watershed of information that is going to absolutely rewrite every book of history. There is evidence left over this entire planet when you start thinking, and you must believe, that we are the offspring of these people. If there was a God, the God created those people before they created us. We are here because of an act of divine creation, but they were people just like us, only older, only more technically advanced. We need to rediscover that in ourselves, that we are a great civilization. We came from a great civilization. And I would tell anybody to look, open your eyes and look for it. Don't be blinded to something that's led to nothing but the slaughter of ourselves for thousands of years. And we still are at that point. We're still a warring society. When this documentary or others like it are put out there and enough people will see it, at least that will start a beacon somewhere that will start shining a little bit brighter. And so at some point we're going to see that we have a different history than what we've been given. The proof's there.
Our true history may be indeed very different than what we've been taught through the ages. Whether this data has been withheld or our identities have just been forgotten, it is our responsibility now to rediscover who we are and where we're going.